Tonight's Colors of the Dark is brought to you by the new book, Vampire in the Peach Tree. Imagine discovering a vampire hiding in your backyard. But wait, it's not just any vampire. It's a vampire who got stuck inside a peach tree. Meet a vampire, the world's clumsiest vampire, in a charming new children's book, A Vampire in the Peach Tree. Perfect for kids age 6 to 9, this magical adventure is packed with fun, friendship, and just the right amount of spooky for Halloween. Why is a vampire in a peach tree? What will happen when a small boy finds out? You'll have to read the story to discover all of his peachy secrets. Parents, A Vampire in a Peach Tree is available right now on Amazon. It's a delightful read that your little ones won't be able to put down. So what are you waiting for? Grab your copy of A Vampire in the Peach Tree today on Amazon and let the adventure begin.
This Halloween season, get ready to add an all-new mind-bending nightmare to your spooky season watch list, Puzzle Box. The latest from acclaimed filmmaker Jack Dynan. Puzzle Box is brought to you by Welcome Villain Films, the studio that served up hits like Malum, Mind, Body, Spirit, and more. Puzzle Box follows recovering drug addict Kate, who flees to a house in the woods to self-rehabilitate, and her sister Olivia, who documents the process. The strange things begin to happen as the house's layout mysteriously begins to change, and the two find themselves trapped inside an inescapable nightmarish puzzle box of a house. With Halloween season in full swing, don't miss the festival hit that critics have called a haunting, harrowing journey into a paranoia-filled rabbit hole, and nothing short of brilliant. From filmmaker Jack Dynan comes a truly terrifying experience of Puzzle Box, now available to rent or purchase on digital platforms. Happy Halloween from Welcome Villain Films.
Hello and welcome to Colors of the Dark. I'm your co-host Rebekah McKendry, and happy Halloween. With me is Elric Kane.
Yes, this is our Halloween edition because it's the last show we will be doing before our craziness of the next couple weeks kicks in.
We'll be taping a show before Halloween, but it's not going to air till November 1st.
Yes.
So this is kind of a big one. We have two massive guests coming up tonight. We do big, long interviews with both of them. So we are going to jump right in and move through all of the things we have been watching. And there is so much coming out right now for Halloween.
The only thing I'll say up front in terms of chatter, even though we're going to go fast, is Terrifier 3 was #1 at the box office. First time ever in the history that an unrated independent film, I think, was #1. I think this might be the first time from reading things about it. And I just want to say how cool that is. Like, whatever your feelings on that movie, it is the coolest thing ever to have been doing shows like this for a decade and seeing the tables turn a bit. That horror is not just some studio thing that occasionally is the big hit that month, but now some indie people who have cultivated fan base can also play in this sandbox. It's pretty wild. So long live indie horror. I love it.
Hell yes. He was able to build an entire franchise out of something that started as a short film that he couldn't get made. And that is fucking amazing. So yay, Terrifier.
Yeah,
keep it
I'd
up.
like to get Damien, like we haven't had Damien Leon on, but it'd be nice to have him once like not just in the press part of it, but let's wait till it's been out and maybe early next year, have him on and just have a deep dive conversation about this stuff.
Totally. I want to hear about how this did become the phenomenon that it is and reshaped box office. So yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful.
So
moment
that's exciting, happening at Halloween, no less, like around the Halloween. Very exciting. Just off I'll be at Knoxville this Saturday. So just throwing that out there. If anyone's in Knoxville, I'll be showing film there, and then Brooklyn on Tuesday, the following Tuesday. So if you're in any of those places, come say hi, Brooklyn Horror Fest. Other than
touch his face.
Don't do that anymore. That was a Shockwaves.
That was
only.
A pre-COVID Elric.
That died with the COVID. Now it's more like
pre-COVID Elric wanted you to touch his face.
My new thing is come down and buy me a drink. See, it's way better for me. You don't have to do anything, and I get a drink.
You don't have to touch his face.
No, and I get a drink.
You just lose $5.
Exactly.
Because he's a cheap date.
$5 if you are living in 1993. Now,
don't buy him the fancy shit. He wants a Pabst,
I
and
probably
that's
do
it.
want a
Actually, Pabst is probably more than $5 now.
Yeah,
so
even Pabst is probably past that. But we saw some films, but we do want to give the time to the back end. But we both saw Salem's Lot, I believe.
Yeah.
See, that's all you need. Yeah, okay, there's your. From now on, we'll make sounds of how we say the title for the quick version of the show. It's like, so we saw Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
And
I really was excited about this one, but I started getting suspicious when it kept getting reshot and then
And delayed,
delayed. So
yeah.
this was originally shot in 2019 and then it got paused, I believe, for COVID. And then it got shot again in 2021. And then they did reshoots in 2022, but then held it for another 2 years before releasing it. And so somewhere in there, there's going to be a lot of cooks in that kitchen. And I'm sure whatever Dauberman's original vision of it was is going to get lost because I'm sure the execs probably changed over and the more cooks that kind of get involved in the project, the more diffused it gets, which is how I can describe this. It was okay. There were some moments that were scary, but the scenes that I found to be scariest in the original version, I found to just be kind
They're
of
bad in this. Those scenes,
bland.
those scenes were they didn't have the amazing scene at the kitchen table where he just comes up behind them, and it's no. This is probably meant to be 3 hours long, but it's been truncated
That's my
down to
guess.
two. Like, there's a couple. It actually was the first movie this year. Like, I kind of was okay with while I'm watching parts of it, especially Bill Camp, who's the older guy who is just
Mm-hmm.
he's the one saving grace of the movie. He's the one who first pulls out the cross and it lights up. That scene is excellent and it has a couple of good attack scenes in a morgue. There's a really good scene. But man, the way this doesn't have anything about the Masterson house in the past, the ghost story,
Yeah.
Stryker, one of the greatest movie characters ever, played by
Comes a
James Mason,
side project.
he's in it like for a couple shots and then he's not even in the movie. It's
No.
and then it becomes Stranger Things with the hero kid. It just, for me, there's so many things that I did not appreciate that direction.
The glowing eyes felt like somebody in post going, we should make it scarier, like make
Yeah.
their eyes glow. But I will say, I am going to show immense appreciation that we have this at all because WB, for years, we were hearing rumors that this was going to be scrapped with the Wile E. Coyote project and Scoop, and that this was going to be scrapped for a tax write-off. And so the fact that they ended up deciding not to do that, that they later then said, well, we need content for, whatever streaming platform we've got to get some content. Let's put it there. I will just be grateful that we have this.
Because it's okay. Like, it's not terrible.
Yeah, it's not
but
bad. It's not
good.
bad.
It's not quite good.
It felt studio diffused.
Yeah.
That's the only way. Like, we know what Gary Dauberman is capable of. I feel like there was a lot of studio, kind of vanilla-ing of this that happened along the way.
But no one needs to hear it. This is obvious. Like, if you watch it, you'll see the same thing.
But it's got some good stuff. So it's worth your time. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take us on to It's What's Inside, which kind of got snuck onto Netflix. Like, we heard this was coming.
Crazy.
But
$17 million spent on this at Sundance. It was one of the biggest in the history. They buy it, and it should be a massive festival crowd pleaser, which it would have been because it was at Sundance. And now
Netflix should have been making giant fanfare about this. It just appeared one day, no press, nothing, and it's fucking great.
It's super fun. I liked it a lot more than Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. It's just like so playful and weird and sci-fi-ish and great young cast. Like, everyone's terrific.
A group of kids not kids, they're like 20-somethings. They've graduated. They all went to college together. They have since graduated college. They've gone off and had professional careers. They come back and are having a gathering that is like a pre-wedding reunion of college friends where one of their couple within their midst is about to get married. And so they've come back to have kind of a pre-wedding celebration. And invited to the party is one person who was expelled from the college. And you don't really know why yet, but you know that he has gone on to become kind of a tech guru, kind of like an Elon Musk.
He seems like a Zuckerberg. He even looks a bit like Zuckerberg from Social Network. It definitely feels like that. And he's got some device.
Crazy invention. Yeah, he's got a device with him, and that's as far as I'll take you.
Yeah, it's super
because
fun.
It's such a good moment when they kind of unveil what the device does. But yeah, this one it's got bodies vibes, but there is just something so fun and how it's shot.
Yeah.
It's using a lot of split screen because you're tracking like 10 different people at a time. And it makes it feel so energetic and frenetic and just fun.
Unfortunately, the criminal part of this isn't just me saying Netflix leaves money on the table sometimes, which I think they do. The criminal part is some movies are designed to be with a crowd. This is a crowd movie and everyone's watching it alone. And it just seems like a missed opportunity sometimes, where this to me is like, of the movies this year, this is like the Substance are saying, like, if you're seeing it with other people, you're gonna be laughing, and like, whereas, I still really enjoyed it alone. I just think it's a shame. I wish some of these things would get a festival
Yeah.
run at least.
Watch this by myself on a
Yeah.
treadmill, and this would have played gangbusters in a
Yeah.
theater.
So, but a good one. Definitely check it out if it's been under your radar. Um,
Yeah.
I won't go into these ones because it's the one is too hard to find yet. But I did go to Beyond Fest to see Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who's like one of my favorite masters. His new film, which is about called Cloud, which is about a reseller of goods online. It sounds really boring. Who basically keeps reselling things and starts making a lot of money. He's kind of a boring character, and then eventually you realize he's pissed off a lot of people. And there's a chat room, and basically anyone he's ever ripped off, they all get together and decide they're going to kill him. And he's like, and it becomes really like a crazy action movie in the second
Okay,
half.
see, this sounds like a comedy.
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
kind of somewhere
Is it?
between dark comedy and a crazy action movie. He said he was there. He said he wanted to make an action film because they don't make a lot in Japan action movies, and he was like, so he wanted to try to do something. And then they played afterwards Chime again, which was one of my top two films of the year so far. It's only 40 minutes, so it's the one he released as a weird, crypto. You had to buy it, you could only rent it through some. And seeing that on the big screen just solidified it. I think it's the best Dread movie of the year. I mean, it's just something about it. Feels the closest to Cure of his movies, and it, even though it's,
And
very
this is
short.
the one you had to get cryptocurrency.
Yeah, you had to like
purchase
rent it from someone. It's just fair. I didn't need to get crypto, but I had to do something. I still don't know how I paid for it, but it was only a few bucks. But this is one about a chef at a chef school teaching people, and then some guy thinks he's hearing a sound, and something bad stuff starts happening. But it's very minimal. But just seeing it on big screen, I was like, yeah, man, this guy's a master. So very cool to see Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Long may he make many more movies. So that was my Beyond Fest. I hit a couple fests. I hit Beyond Fest, and weirdly enough, unplanned, I hit Scream Fest really quickly because my friend, the editor Star, he had just been in Sitges and met the people who made this movie. So it came here, called Heresy. I think you would have liked this a lot. Heresy, aka Witweaven. Witweaven. Yeah, it was. I saw it on some lists for movies to watch this year by director Didier Konings, and it's a medieval Dutch village. It's a true Dutch, medieval story that he's bringing up, and they've created this whole village in the middle of a forest, and it's really looking at misogyny in that village and how women are secondary citizens. But then there's these creatures, these fawn type, more menacing than that sounds, creatures in the woods, and they start thinking she's because she can't have a child, they think she's fornicating with devils, and maybe she is. And it gets only 60 minutes because he made it for a TV there, but obviously he made it so well that people have been playing at festivals. And
It played at Fantastic Fest.
yeah, it's from the Netherlands, and it's it looks like The Witch. Visually, it looks like The Witch, but it's got some more crazy special effects and crazy kind of creatures once you get into the woods. I think this would be your bag because it's also very folk horror. So, and I hadn't been to Screamfest in a little while, so it was nice to be able to pop in there and get that festival vibe.
Yeah. Okay, so I have spent those are the only two films that I watched was Salem's Lot and It's What's Inside. I spent the rest of my time deep diving into television to the point that like one of these shows, it was hard for me to quit to go watch other things to cover on the show. It is. So I'll start by saying From is totally banging this season. We're on the third season now. And it is just getting better as it goes. It is just so amazing. So From, if you've not been watching it, holy shit, it's blown up this season. And then I started watching Sweet Pea. And this is a British show about a young girl. Oh gosh, I can't remember the actress's name, and I love her. I will watch her in just about anything. I like her too. Yeah, she is what makes this show. But it's about a young girl who is young professional. She's working at an office, and she's heavily bullied. She was really bullied in high school. She feels like no one even notices her. Her boss doesn't notice her, and it basically, the first episode is all about this time period of her life. Her father passes away. She's passed over for a promotion. Her high school bully moves back to town, is a realtor who is now selling her dad's house. And basically she snaps after all of this stress and acts, not even accidentally, she kills somebody, and suddenly finds this immense power and strength behind it and starts wanting to do it more and more. And it's I keep hearing that it's like female Dexter. It isn't like female Dexter at all, because it's not about her feeling compelled to kill from the beginning. It's about a society that's pushing her to do it. And so and her motive is not to kill bad people or that she has to do it. It is all about being forced into a corner and lashing back. And so it's funny. That's the thing, though. It's a comedy. It's very much a dark comedy. So it is shot like a comedy. There's hilarious moments in the first. I'm 3 episodes in. Two episodes in. There's hilarious moments in those first 2 episodes. So I've been absolutely loving this. And this one, British, and I think I got this on Stars, I want to say.
The actress is Ella Purnell from Yellow Jacket. She's the one for the first season, the main blonde girl. So
love her. And then I'll quickly mention the other show, which has become my obsession, which I really was not planning for it to be, and that's Grotesquerie. Like this, I thought it was like Ryan Murphy Does Seven, and it is Ryan Murphy Does Seven, but I didn't realize how much I needed that in my life. Now, I will admit I have grown completely off of the more recent American Horror Stories. Like I watched a couple of the anthological ones where it was like they were doing these kind of standalone stories. I've watched a few of those and liked them, but the actual series American Horror Story, I had not enjoyed the last couple of seasons. So I had stopped watching. I started watching this because somebody told me how much I would love it. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. And it is Ryan Murphy Does Seven. Is the best way I could describe it. It's Nicey Nash and Michaela Diamond, who I only know from Broadway. Like, she has not done much film at all. She is a Broadway singer. It is a dead serious, and I say this momentarily, it is a dead serious serial killer procedural that is so over the top, silly, campy, and weird that it is just this, like, sounds like it would utterly be a tonal mess, but somehow it's working. It is about a serial killer named Grotesquerie who is killing people, viciously killing people, and positioning the bodies so that they have religious symbolism. Like in one of them, he kills like 8 homeless people and positions them to look like the Last Supper. And it is Nicey Nash, who is playing a burned out alcoholic detective who teams up with Michaela Diamond, who is playing a very progressive nun obsessed with true crime. And they are together hunting this serial killer. And it's things like they're driving out to the desert to go to these coordinates that the serial killer left him. And while they're driving, one of them breaks into a show tune from Jesus Christ Superstar. And then the music kicks in. And then they both start singing the entire song, like full out musical. And then it snaps and they're back in it and they're back in the serial killer hunt. Like, it's this level of kind of weirdness. Travis Kelce, the football player, appears at one point as almost like a guardian angel, to the point that I did not think this character existed. No, and when he appeared on screen, I was like, is that Taylor Swift's boyfriend? And legit, I almost turned it off because I was like, I don't even like where this is going. And somehow I can't call him great in it, but it makes sense because of the tonality of this show. Like, it fucking tracks. It is weird and absurdist and funny, but somehow captivating. And I do not even know how this tone exists or could ever be replicated, but somehow it's working. And it is still these incredibly gruesome, like Seven-esque serial killing, like borderline like True Detective style, but handled with like a John Waters kind of level of campiness brewing underneath. So I'm on like the 6th episode and I cannot stop.
I can't trust reviews of his work until someone's seen all of it, because I don't think he's ever stuck a landing for me.
Stuck the landing?
Ever. Maybe the first season of one of those American Horror Story. Yeah, maybe the first season. But like, it's usually one of those things where I watch 8 episodes and then I'm like at the end going, wait, what's going on now? But I'll wait till you're done. And then
I loved Pose. Honestly, that's the one that I consider to be some of his best work. Like Pose, which is not horror in any capacity, but I loved that show so much. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I'm 6 episodes in and I want to finish our podcast so I can go keep watching. It's great.
I'll flick through real quick. There's one on Max I hadn't heard of, but I think you might dig it. It's not really horror, more sci-fi, I guess. CADDO Lake. Have you heard of this thing? It's
Huh.
brand new on there. It is basically it's all set in a swamp. I'm not sure where exactly, swampland, and it basically is two parallel stories that you're watching, where an 8-year-old girl's gone missing in the swamp, and her sister's trying to find her and her family, and then Dylan O'Brien from Teen Wolf and Maze Runner and everything. He's
Love
great. Yeah,
Dylan
he's one of my
O'Brien.
favorite of the young actors. He is a guy who lives out there. His mother had died in an accident with him in the water, and he's trying to figure it out. And as they both are going through the swamp, at one point, you kind of realize there's a time loop, a spot where if you step over, suddenly you're in a different era or a different time. And I won't say more than that because it's kind of more about how these two character stories are kind of entwining. That is why it's worth watching, but it's really well done, and it's a very smart time loop movie. Less on the thriller horror and more on the emotional story. But it was a nice surprise, CADDO Lake. But the two I want to bring attention to are both Shudder ones, so I won't go deep. But one of them I particularly liked, and I was very surprised how much I liked it. Actually, one of my favorites of the year, and I think that might surprise some people. So there's two. One is Daddy's Head, which I thought I would love, and I liked it a lot. It has basically a boy and a stepmother. The dad's dying in the opening scene, and you realize the stepmom is not someone who wants to be a stepmom. She's very young. She's not really ready. And then basically, something lands in the woods. You don't really know. There's a big light show, and now his dad's head is basically attached to some creature. Now, every time you see that, it's fucking great. And the reason why people are like, this is so scary, there are these moments that are very shockingly scary and really interesting and kind of just imagery you haven't quite seen before. But it does feel a little padded out for the kind of concept. It feels a bit like, oh, this is like the best 20-minute short ever. And then it really well directed. Everything's good. But I found it a little, for me, just a little colder, or something missing in the emotional part of a story about like losing your father. But it's solid. So definitely watch. And it'll be some people's favorite of the year for sure, because I get it. The image is really unique. But the one I thought I wasn't going to like, and I don't mind saying when I'm just totally off on something, and this won't be for everyone, but like for whatever reason, this was so my jam. And it was Little Bites, directed by Spider One. I absolutely got into this movie. Like, so this is when I just had a preconceived notion, like heavy metaler making a movie. Like that was just, preconceptions that we always get of anything we do. But I had met Chrissy and him down at Fantastic Fest for a second. They both seemed super nice. And I didn't know what kind of actress she was. So my brain, she's like, oh, she's going to be some famous person's wife acting in movies. And then I saw the start of Terrifier 3, and she was the best in it, in my opinion. The first 10 minutes, the cold open, I thought she was fantastic. So I was like, became interested. So I was like, okay, I'm going to check out Little Bites. And I just really love the way it looks and feels. And it's a very emotion driven story. And she, from start to end, is just fantastic, I thought, in this movie. So the whole movie can be summed up in the first 10 seconds of the movie. She gets a bell rings in her house. She goes downstairs, she opens the door, goes into this dark room, and there's this guy. You don't really see him in darkness, some sort of vampiric thing. He's just like, I'm hungry. And she has to give over a part of herself to be eaten. And as you learn that this thing is like taking small bites of her, and all of her body's getting disfigured, but the alternate would be that it would eat her daughter if her daughter was there. So she's protecting her daughter. And there isn't much to it. Like, again, you could say the same thing about this. Oh, it's more like a short. But the difference is emotionally, I think it was really about the emotion of this character from start to end. And then a couple of our friends, good friend Mark Kelly comes in as one of the characters. Barbara Crampton comes in as well.
Barbara.
So I don't know what it was. And also the guy playing the creature, his name's John Skolaroff. I thought he was really good. This one surprised me. So I really went in going, is this just going to be something I watch for the show? And honestly, I thought it was one of the better things I've seen this year. And it just has the vibe that I was looking for. It won't be for everyone, but I really dug it. So, and Chrissy Fox, I just think she's a really interesting actor. Great
Yeah.
presence on screen. So, kudos to those guys. A couple good Shudder ones in a row.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'm gonna go to one graphic novel, and then that's all I got. Do you got anything else
No,
before
I
do
think
my
I think
one
do your
graphic?
graphic novel, and then we'll say just a couple lines to set up the movie because
Yeah.
because we didn't really talk about the plot in the next interview. Yeah.
Okay. I had to get this in because this is the most fucked up thing I have read in years.
Okay.
And I'm really excited to talk about it. If I don't, my head's gonna explode. Lovesick by Luana Vecchio. And this is from Image. This has been out for a year now. And I found this because somebody on Twitter literally had messaged, like, you want some really fucked up horror comic shit? Read Lovesick. And of course, at that point, I'm like, okay. So I blind bought this knowing nothing about it, just that somebody on the internet had told me it was fucked up. This is one of the wildest comics I have ever read. Like every page is more shocking than the rest. But goddamn, this is so beautifully unhinged. Like it's beautiful. But this was sick to the degree of I at times questioned if I always read graphic novels before I go to bed. And I've never had to stop and say, I don't know if I should be reading this late. Because I was scared about the dreams I would have coming off of it. It's about a dominatrix named Domino, aka Mother Demon, is what her followers call her, who kills people on live video feeds on the dark web. But these are people who beg for her to do it. Like they have to put in applications and petitions to be killed by her. So she is making snuff films online, and people are begging Mother Demon to be the one to kill them. They become that obsessed with watching her, and they want her to torture them to death. And her entire outfit, this entire show, is being funded by cannibals who are waiting in the wings to eat the bodies of whoever she kills. And so it's all the fetishes in one, like all of them. And it does not even stop with like submissive and dom and cannibalism. It gets into all of them. It is intensely bloody, intensely gory. Like there is so much just raw, just displayed sex in this. But somehow it is also strikingly beautiful. It is so intensely gross and gorgeous. I can't even, like, this was like nothing I've ever read. It felt like there was a phase back in the late 2000s where Synapse Films was doing a release of all of these like horny Japanese films. And there was one called Angel Guts Red Porno that I remember watching and being like, oh my God, like I feel like I need a shower after this. And I want to talk about it because I found it to be so captivating, but it is so disgusting. I feel weird talking about it with anybody so that they know I actually saw this and enjoyed it. That's how I feel about this comic, which is why I had to talk about it on the show, because now the world has to know how much I enjoyed it. This hits a lot of sensitivity buttons. I will say that, as I rarely give trigger warnings on this show. Subservience, rape, cannibalism, snuff films, just wow. Like if something, it pushed my buttons. Like if something is really going to kind of like make you cringe and make you nauseous, it's in this book. But that said, Lovesick, holy fucking shit. I will not forget this one.
Wow. Okay. That does sound intense. I might have to borrow it and see if I can handle it. Okay. So coming up on the show, our second guest will be Brad Henderson, who is like us, an obsessed person on finding the deep dives of cinema. So we're going to go into some deep cuts with him and talk about his Terror Vision label a little bit. But first, we have the writer of Woman of the Hour, the film that drops today on Netflix, directed by Anna Kendrick. But when we interviewed him, I don't know if we actually talked much about the very basics of the plot. But there's a famous, I guess it became a famous story years later, where it's like, oh my God, did you know there was a serial killer on the dating game once? And people would
a real serial killer.
Yeah, they'd post the YouTube links or whatever. But this is really about a woman trying to be an actress in Hollywood, getting booked to be on this show and not realizing who the suitor is, and then going through other parts of the timelines. We're seeing this killer Rodney Alcala going about what basically what he does, his MO.
Spree. Yeah.
And I think we both were really taken by this movie. Like it's not you could just think, oh, it's an Anna Kendrick movie on Netflix. It's a really impressive debut, and it's a very tense movie.
She directed the shit out of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk to the writer Ian McDonald. Okay, so I am super excited to bring this next person on, because not only has he been a friend of Elric and I for honestly like a decade now that we've known you, but he also just wrote the absolutely amazing film that Elric and I watched a couple weeks ago and have absolutely loved, Woman of the Hour. McDonald, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me on. This is just delightful.
Oh my gosh, we are so excited to have you. Like legit, I did not realize, as much as I made fun of Elric for not realizing this was you, when the press release first came to me about this, I didn't realize it was you either. And then suddenly, as soon as I started looking up, I was like, oh shit, we know him. And I was so elated to see your name on this. So how did this script come about? Because this was a Blacklist script, right?
Yeah. So I just spec'd it. I mean, I wrote the first draft like almost 8 years ago at this point. So it's
That's
been
standards. Yeah, that's standard
yeah,
studio
yeah,
length.
no. Well, yeah, no, it's funny. I was complaining about that after the movie, premiered at TIFF and to like other senior screenwriters, and they're just like, no, that's normal. Like I was
You know,
talking to like Larry Karaszewski and Scott Alexander, and they're just like, Dolomite took us 20 years. What are you complaining about? And it's
Mm.
just like,
I
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I just had Craig Perry, who was the producer on the Final Destination movies and American Pie movies. He came in to talk to my class this afternoon and he cited I think it was
Mm.
a Variety or a Deadline report where they actually took like a statistical poll and the average length of time from when somebody started shopping to when it actually got made, if it got made, was 9 years. So 8 to 9. So you're doing great. You're below statistical average. Keep
Yeah,
going
yeah,
though. Tell
no.
us about
Um,
shot. You spec'd it and you started taking it out.
yeah, no. And it was one of those projects that kept almost happening for just years, where it got picked up by one company and it got really close to getting made, and then the company disbanded, it fell apart, and then it was picked up by another company, and then, optioned by a studio, and then put around and turnaround, like right when I thought we were about to go into production. And then it just kept happening over and over again. And I just thought the movie was never going to get made. And yeah, somehow it all came together. It's just, everyone says that like, any movie happening is a miracle. And it's like I feel that in my bones
Oh
now.
my gosh, yeah.
Do you think it came together finally because of who was directing it with Anna Kendrick, like somebody who was a known quantity, or was it coming together prior to her becoming the director?
No. It was coming together prior to
Yeah.
that. We had another director attached for a while, who is great and wonderful, but there was like a scheduling conflict where the studio's like, we have to make this now, and they just weren't available, and so they had to bow out. And this was 6 weeks. At this point, we had a studio, we had a budget, we had a schedule, and we were going to shoot in like 6 weeks. And that I thought was like, oh, it's the final nail in the coffin. And yeah, then Anna raised her hand to direct it, and they said yes. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's happening. It's going to happen. But then, of course, it's just like, well, what's it going to look like? Because she hasn't directed before, and at that point, I really hadn't interfaced with her a whole lot. Uh, and so, I went to her house, and we spent a lovely afternoon just talking about like, how we saw the movie and how she saw the movie, and and it was just like, creatively a match made in heaven. I met with her and she's just like, yeah, I kind of wanted to be like Zodiac meets No Country for Old Men. And I mean, I am just like, great, those are two of my favorite films. And, it definitely has those elements in it, but there's a lot about it that's like just kind of purely Anna. Um,
Which
yeah,
which is
so it was
interesting with
extremely.
preconceptions. Well, preconceptions that people have with stars, especially actors who haven't, including yourself, right, who haven't directed before, which is totally valid when somebody hasn't directed before. But like I went into it going, oh, okay, this is a story I've been interested in the basics. Current, like a lot of true crime people, I study criminology and stuff. So knowing about Rodney Alcala was like everyone has heard that little part. They've seen a photo or a clip of him on the dating game. I wouldn't have known how somebody would have fleshed out the other kind of threads of the story, which are very compelling, going
Yeah.
through time. So we'll get to that. But like I will say, like I was incredibly impressed by how she put this film together, and I think she also, and I without having seen the script, she is also slipping in something that feels very much like a perspective that you would have had to have felt had to be lived in a little bit in terms of how people are talking to her, how people are reacting around her, the kind of the fabric of misogyny that's not just like, oh, there's a misogynist. It's actually, no, it's a fabric of characters and institutions and the network. I mean, I found that to be really, really something, right? Quite original in a movie.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not just
Yeah.
misogyny, it's the misogyny of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like it is very specific, but very much, it feels lived in.
Yeah.
It feels like everything that's still happening to degrees.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, that was kind of always the goal. Like, I didn't want it to be a movie about a serial killer. It's a movie that has a serial killer in it, which is kind of about the spectrum of misogyny. And Rodney Alcala represents like the most extreme end of that, but he is not in and of himself the spectrum.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's also the boyfriend who's trying to talk his girlfriend out of knowing what she knows, don't you think they would have like vetted the guy? Like, are you sure? Are you really sure? Like, that's kind of the most benign end. And
Right.
then you have like the icky neighbor, and then you have the host of the show.
I found that to
And
be the
it's,
most disturbing.
The icky
No,
neighbor.
no, the host of the show. I found the host.
Oh no, mine was the icky neighbor. I've lived next to that guy
Yeah.
before. He's gross. Yeah, no, that was the one that creeped me out. But the host was equally disgusting.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know. I like, to, to me, that's the thing that's like interesting and hopefully like useful to explore. Like, I mean, I find serial killer stories fascinating. But there's been a lot of them, and so it's just like, what is this going to do that's like new or interesting? And to me, that was kind of the thing.
And they're hard to get into them. It gets pretty hard to get into the mindset of an unknowable mind.
Mhm.
What's making this person tick, unless they're alive telling you in their own words, it makes it very hard to put an original spin on a mind like that. So I think the way you've structured this is really just fascinating. Could you just tell us a little bit about when you discovered this story, the true life story, and how you started thinking about it as more than that?
Yeah, yeah. So, like it started with just like reading about him online and some list of strange true crime stories. But, to write a screenplay, it takes months or years of your life. And so that's not really enough to like make you want to commit that amount of time. And so I just started researching him. And it's funny because when I started researching this, um, there was both more and less research material than there is now. Like now, there's all these podcasts about him and additional books that didn't exist then. The flip side of that is there were a lot more episodes of The Dating Game from the '70s on YouTube then than there are now.
Hmm.
But I remember reading this one article about where they interviewed a coworker of his at the LA Times who said like, yeah, no, he used to come in and bring this photo album of his, and he would show it off to everyone, and it would be filled with like photos of like naked underage girls, and would be like, oh God, I don't know, how did the parents feel about this? And Rodney would be like, they paid me to take it, and they're just like, okay, I guess that's okay.
Hmm.
And like honestly, like that was kind of the thing that I thought was the most interesting about him, because like in true crime circles, he's sometimes compared to like Ted Bundy. And what I think people,
Mhm.
why they make that association is just like, he's kind of handsome and he's well educated and he's kind of charming. But like in actuality, they seem like very different people to me. Like Ted Bundy was a chameleon. He was really good at making himself seem like something he wasn't. And Rodney Alcala kind of flaunted what he was. There weren't a lot of people that were just like, oh my God, not Rodney. Like it couldn't possibly be him. Everyone's just like, yeah, that kind of checks out.
Hmm.
And so like as soon as you learn that, you realize that the real story has less to do with Rodney himself, and it has more to do with everybody around him looking the other way. And that looking the other way is kind of the thing that enabled him to get away with what he did for so long. And I mean, it like serial killers are interesting. In a way, I think our mythology surrounding them lends them more depth than they actually have. I think because what they do is so dark, we treat them as like these human oceans, when in fact they're puddles. They don't run all that deep. And so it's just like, you know, spending a lot of time with him wasn't super appealing to me, but spending time in the culture that enabled him, I thought was complicated and interesting. And so that's really what made me latch onto the story.
Hmm.
And how much research did you do? Did you like really dive into kind of the history behind Rodney and the
Mhm.
days leading up to him going on the dating game?
Yeah. So like there were a handful of like, old magazine articles and newspaper articles that were helpful. But honestly, the thing that was the most useful was like at the time I was writing this, I was a teacher at Loyola Marymount University, and so I had access to this big, beautiful library that they have. And I started going through like old LA Times articles that weren't about Rodney Alcala, but they were about the victims before they knew who had actually killed them.
Mm.
And so that actually provided this really interesting snapshot of the time and the place and the circumstances under which the bodies were found and where people were coming from. And a lot of that wasn't contained in any of the other, books or books or articles that I read. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed the kind of journalistic aspect of it. Like, literally I spent an afternoon just researching like, okay, when he worked at the LA Times, was he using like hot press or cold press? Like what stage of newspaper production were we in? And so like I love that stuff. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So when you were kind of fleshing out the character of Rodney, I'm intrigued. In the movie, he's charming. Like there is a definite charm to him, which I always think of when I think of something like Ted Bundy, like he was supposed to have this charm to him. Was Rodney actually like that in real life? Did you find reports that he actually had like this charm? And he was so well composed in the movie to the point of, coming off as quite intelligent.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was a smart guy. I talked to a couple of people who were in the kind of LA party scene in the 1970s, and they would cross paths with him from time to time. I remember talking to this one woman who said like, yeah, it was like the end of the night and the club was shutting down and he offered me a ride home and I was about to get in his car and then a friend of mine was like, no, no, come with me. And so I went with her instead. And through that and just through like interviews that I would read, he was really smart. He studied at UCLA and NYU, and he did study film under Roman Polanski, which is weird.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and everyone said like, yeah, he was really fascinated with like film and music and pop culture and stuff like that. And he was, kind of a motor mouth, which is kind of less how he's depicted in the movie, but
Mhm.
that's also him in the context of like 2 a.m. at a club in LA, and most of the scenes in the movie take place in very intimate settings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of portraying him as charismatic with an asterisk. And the asterisk is that he kind of has a shtick that he does to like lure people in. And you see him do it over and over again, where he'll say like, "Oh, you look like this actress," or you look like a model, and most of the time it works, but when it doesn't work, that's kind of what's interesting. Like at one point he tells, Anna Kendrick's character, like, oh, you've got this like, oh God, how am I blanking on her name?
From
Up my mouth.
yeah,
Patty
Patty
Patty Smith.
Patty Smith, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. You got this Patty Smith vibe, and is just like, no, I so don't have that. And she laughs at him, and suddenly like the whole interaction just kind of curdles. He gets really kind of embarrassed and defensive and sort of sour. And like and so like he's charming, but he's also like he's got a paper thin ego, it just collapses in the rain. And so like I tried to keep that balance, I didn't want him to be too cool or too charming or too anything.
It's cleverly done.
Because
The shallow
there's all
thing that you were talking about, it being shallow, that's what you managed to do with some of these portrayals, because like yes, he has a shtick to get woman, but I think it was most telling when he was showing the photos to the people in the LAPD, and the one guy notices and hears the story twice about, oh, Warren Beatty. And it's just like, this is a guy who actually doesn't have much to say. He's got this much to say, and but it comes off really well if you're only around him that long. And most women only last
yeah,
around that long around him, because once you see
yeah,
behind the mask, and any movie that can have a moment like where you peek behind the mask, of Wolf Creek has the
Hmm.
great moment where the guy's like, that must be great, and he just looks at him. It's a chilling moment. This has it multiple times, I think, and it's always really interesting because it's always when he feels like, oh, there isn't really a hope for a real connection, or he feels like a little bit wounded or something, like a
Hmm.
baby, like a
mhm.
child. Basically, he's pretty immature. It's quite smart on that level. I think the way it's showing the different sides of him, not just through the woman he's trying to seduce, but also the other people in this world. And so, I mean, on that level, I think you
Thank
did
you.
do that. I think you showed the shallowness of what he's actually got to offer pretty well.
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like as it was being cast out, how was Anna kind of looking at characters, and were you part of the casting discussion in any capacity?
For the most part, no. She would, we had a lot of conversations before going out to anyone about
Mhm.
like just who theoretically would make sense with to play Rodney. And one of the conversations we had was like, how important is it to cast a Latino actor, because Rodney was Latin American. And it's tricky because the films as our characters, as our people, intersectional, you know?
Yep.
And this is not a movie that really aspires to talk about race. It's aspiring to talk about gender and power dynamics. And so on one hand, it's kind of like, you know, I don't think that's super important. And yet at the same time, it's like to not do that, you're robbing the character of like some little, you know, aspect of authenticity. And so, yeah, and so we would have sort of broad general conversations like that. But I do remember her honing in on Daniel Zavato pretty quickly. You know, she had seen his work in Station 11, and I'm pretty sure she felt like he's the only one who can play him. And if he doesn't do the movie, then I'm not sure there's a movie to make. And so
Yeah.
we were just like over the moon happy when he said yes.
We were saying off
And
air how
how
much he's like Vincent D'Onofrio.
he has
He
Vincent
looks like a
D'Onofrio
young
energy.
version in a big way, which is great. Like the
Yeah.
perfect energy for it. Yeah.
And he has that same energy in this as a Vincent D'Onofrio, where I'm like, he's really smart and calm and composed, but I could feel like he's going to snap at any minute and like chew your face off. How much
Yeah.
research did you go into the dating game? Did you end up having to like watch the dating game or research kind of the production history behind it? Because that host
Yeah.
felt spot on.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, to a degree, I feel bad about the host because there's no evidence that the host himself was a creep. So it's more like taking the idea of the
Yeah.
host and extrapolating for thematic reasons. But yeah, no, I just watched hours and hours of that show, and it's just like, you know, reading about serial killers is um, that is very sincerely and emotionally grueling experience. Watching hours of old dating game episodes is maybe worse in some ways. It's, you know, you're watching really ordinary people try to be spontaneous and clever on national television. And it's just like, I have like, you know, it is so easy to make me feel like intensely uncomfortable and awkward. Like, you know, bad wedding speeches are my kryptonite. I just wither under it. And it's just that over and over and over again. But there was a lot of really good stuff that came out of it. Like in particular, I remember this one episode, and again, most of the episodes have been taken off YouTube at this point, so they're hard to find. But there was one episode where this young woman kind of went rogue on the show, where she had clearly thrown away the questions that she had been given, and she wanted to use her questions to spotlight, you know, the kind of sexist tendencies of the show, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is mesmerizing. And so like that kind of informed where that section of the show went plot wise. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I just love the research process, and I always try to like inundate myself with like too much information and then kind of filter out what seems useful and what doesn't.
So I guess they're not going to meet up in Carmel, huh?
Aw, no trip to
It was
Carmel.
so sad. It was so sad that we're not going to. I think that inclusion of her going rogue is like it's kind of becomes the heart of the movie. Yeah, it becomes the heart of that character, and it's terrific. This is a really terrific movie. I mean, I'm comparing it especially to like the last 10 years of movies like this, where often I think they don't bring anything new. They often are bringing just the sensational aspects. Maybe if it's the you know, the Menendez brothers and some of these shows that are, you know, can be entertaining, but this actually was one of the first in a while that I felt like had a very firm viewpoint to tell us something.
Yeah, it was very much texturized within the time period. So
Really
whatever you're working on next, are you going to do another kind of historical piece with like a copious amount of research behind it, or kind of what's coming up next?
Yeah, there's one thing that's kind of like true crime me, but with a lowercase t and a lowercase c. So that's, you know, less serial killer based and more like, you know, can you ever forgive me? You know, Dog Day Afternoon, like that kind of a vibe. Um, uh, yeah, it's like after the movie premiered at TIFF, I was suddenly sent a lot of like, hey, do you want to adapt this serial killer story or that serial killer story? And honestly, I think I need like 4 or 5 years away from it, just because it is just crushingly depressing to just read that all day, every day. And you know, and honestly, most of these stories I don't think have to be told. But I mean, to your point, I don't think they really add anything new to the conversation. Sometimes it is just a story about like a really bad guy killing a couple of college girls, and there's nothing more to be learned or gained from it. And it's just like, I don't know, life's too short to spend your time working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're here for whatever is next. So thank you so much. So when does this premiere on Netflix? Do you have the set date?
Yeah, October 18th, I think.
October
Yes,
So this
18th.
Friday, right? This
So
Friday.
this Friday, so the day that
Yeah.
this is
Yes.
airing, you can go watch this on Netflix. Absolutely incredible. And it wasn't, I mean, it's depressing because it's a serial killer movie, but there was still so much kind of social power behind it that it really had other levels than just serial killers. So yeah,
Yeah,
there was a
because
lot
it
to
stops
it.
feeling like, I think you're saying it right, like it's not really a serial killer film. The serial killer is a character in a film about a woman trying to navigate this game show and her career, and so it's like, and even her
Yeah.
decision at the end, we won't put spoilers, is an interesting one. It's like just a
Hmm.
curious character study in its own way. So,
Yeah.
but a really neat film. Congrats, good to see you again.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us tonight, Ian.
No, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been too long. I miss losing to Elric at horror trivia every week or every
We
week.
better get you back. Hey, it's happening Thursday night,
I
so
know.
feel free to swing by.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Ian.
Today's Colors of the Dark is brought to you by the new book, The Bone Picker. Under the shadow of gray clouds, three children venture into the woods where they spot the corpse of an old man. Suddenly, a menacing figure emerges with long fingernails and tangled hair. It's the Bone Picker, come to strip the rotten flesh from the dead. The Bone Picker is just one of many entries who lurk behind every page of the new spine-tingling collection of native horror fiction. The Bone Picker, Native Stories, Alternative Histories, written by the award-winning Devin Mahisua and published by University of Oklahoma Press. As a Choctaw citizen with deep ties in Indian Territory and Oklahoma, Mahisua grew up hearing the stories of her ancestors. Those stories, captured and retold in The Bone Picker, will induce shivers and masterfully exhibit the importance of native storytelling while haunting readers long after the last page. Hailed by Kirkus Reviews as a chilling collection of stories about the tricksters and other beings of Choctaw lore who refuse to be forgotten, The Bone Picker is an indigenous horror story collection not to be missed. Cryptids, witches, and other supernatural forces await you, so check out The Bone Picker wherever terrifying tales are sold.
All right, welcome back. Well, when we were down at Fantastic Fest, for the first time, I got to meet someone who had been following for probably a decade or so, whether it's their film reviews, titles being dropped, or in some insane letterbox calls, but always amusing. And that is our friend of the show, Brad Henderson from TERROR Vision. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was nice to meet both of you.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, you do these festivals sometimes and you talk to people for years
Yeah.
and then you never meet them face to face. So yeah, it's always like,
Especially like journalists and stuff. There's so many like film writers that I'm used to seeing their tiny little face for like a decade on
The
Twitter or
byline
something.
or their Twitter.
And then you
or
see
for
them
me-
and they just look different in 3 dimensions.
So as
Yeah,
Elric
yeah.
mentioned, you're always you're honestly kind of my I'll say like my catalyst moderator on Letterboxd because I watch
Oh God.
really weird, fucked up, hard to find shit, as I know all of us do here.
Yeah.
But mine is always like, is this like worth my time? And if I see that you have watched it and you've given it anything above like 1 star, I'm like, well, Brad liked it. And so it's like, okay, if Brad gave it a hot take, I think I can do the same. So
But
yeah,
usually
that's
I'm
a
like,
lot.
usually I'm like, if Brad gives it 5 stars, I might not like it. But if he gives it 3, it's probably okay. That's how I have to
What?
judge it.
There was
That's
one that we were
completely
talking
fine.
about a couple nights ago where you were like, well, Brad gave it 4 stars. And I can't even remember what it was, but we had this exact conversation where it was something that I was debating whether or not it was a deep cut. And I was like, I don't know. I tried to watch it and I can't even remember.
But
Now
I
I'm gonna have
believe
to
you.
look back
That's what's
through.
important. Like,
I know. And I'm like, well, Brad said it's 4 stars.
I know
So-
you believe that,
Well-
so that's what's important.
I'm very, very forgiving pretty much from everything since the beginning of time to like George Méliès stuff to like about 2005.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I'm just like super critical.
I remembered what it
Because-
was.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, go.
Stay Alive. The
Well,
one about the killer. You gave it 4 stars. And I
Fucking
was
masterpiece.
So I was
What is that?
watching it.
Is that before 2005 or after? It's right around there.
I think it's
2007.
2006.
Okay,
Is it?
so
Yeah.
for you, that's a good 4 stars. That's singing praises. If it's
Yeah.
I think it's a misunderstood masterpiece.
I loved that because it was so what I had done, and this is for our Patreon show. I have been doing a Is It Still Bad series. And so last week I watched Stay Alive, I watched Phantoms, and there was another one I did last week,
Covenant or
The
something.
Covenant, The Covenant. So I watched all three of those.
Oh, the Rennie Harlan movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I watched all three of those on our Patreon show last week and then discussed Is It Still Bad? And my takeaway from Phantoms was this got some fucking scary stuff in it. Like that I really found
The first 20 minutes are
20 minutes.
kind of
Great.
terrifying.
Covenant was as somebody on Letterboxd put, like the most homoerotic episode of Charmed ever, and I kind of loved that. Like, but then there was Stay Alive, and I was like, I do not know what to make of this movie yet, because there are parts of it that I was like, okay, and then there are other parts that I was like, oh no. And
Yeah,
it was like, I
terrible
gave
script.
it 4 stars.
It's a terrible script, and the actors are chewing up the scenes, but like I think the script is just so bad for that movie. But I really do think William Brent Bell is a very good director.
He is. He's been doing good work lately. Yeah.
And I loved,
like, he understands composition. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're totally. We talk it's bound to happen.
It's happened
But
on podcasting.
Yeah.
the guy, and I'm not remember his name off the cuff right now, but he's a McPool on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, was like the next thing that I knew him from, but he's the comic relief in Stay Alive. He's supposed to be like the
He's so
plucky one.
funny.
He's great.
He's funny in every movie. Yeah.
Yeah, he was, and I know him from It's Always Sunny, but seeing him in this movie and seeing kind of his humble beginnings here, I was like, oh my God, he's great in that. So he was like the one actor that I was like, he really held his own and had some great lines. So anyway, sidebar, just because you came
your
up,
Patreon.
you came up, no, this was all went down over text because Elric and I, we have ridiculously, we text each other multiple times a day about what we're watching or what we're thinking about watching. And that was last week's was like, I just watched Stay Alive. I don't know what to make of it. Well, Brad gave it 4 stars. So,
if you haven't been following him for a decade,
entered the chat, sir.
Yeah, if you haven't followed him for a decade, tell us about what you do, because I know Terror Vision is a label that you originated. So you've worked for a lot of other people, but.
So first, did you watch the director's cut of Stay Alive?
I don't know.
It's only on DVD. It's
Hold
only
it.
on DVD.
Do go on. Give me 1 sec.
Because the DVD of Stay Alive, I think it's like 15 or 20 minutes that are missing from the movie.
Like a good 15 or 20 minutes, or
I believe it's a good 15 minutes, because they do.
I watched the unrated director's cut.
Okay, yeah, that's it. So that has all the gore and everything.
Oh, it was hyper gory. Lots of hook action.
Yeah, and they don't do that in the cut that's been like, it was in theaters and then is now in HD, like in streaming. It's completely neutered.
And this is the shit that I love, that there's somebody out there who can get into the very granular differences between the theatrical and the director's cut of Stay Alive. And that's why you're on this fucking show, sir.
Well, what he's best known for is being the person who led me to seeing Severed Arm for the first time, which is really what's important in my life. One of my favorite movies in the last decade, I'd say, that I think I just looked at it because you had like rated it at one point and then you released it. And I was like, oh man, this is a great fucking movie.
Yeah, if I was in my other room, I have the original one sheet for that movie.
Oh, cool.
Theater. So
wow.
Yeah, I love that movie so much.
So that goes to show you were doing work for other labels, like whether it's Vinegar Syndrome or whoever, for a long time. So maybe just walk us through a little bit about the work you've been doing for other companies that led you to Terror Vision, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I started doing journalism back in the day, and I was going to film festivals as like a civilian, just watching things, and I got into journalism, but I wanted to write more about weird shit, and no one wants to ever publish that. They're not interested. They only want the new, killer beer can movie that's now streaming. So I slowly got into like programming, because that was a big thing. Curation was always a big thing. So I started working at Wild Eye Releasing.
Oh yeah,
was something, because I liked
I
a lot of great stuff. So yeah, I started doing that, and then I was just kind of online one day, just looking for DVDs and Blu-rays like on Amazon or whatever, and I came across an entry for um oh my gosh, one of my Night Train to Terror
Mhm.
Yeah.
on Blu-ray, and this is like maybe 2012 or something. And I just thought it was a bootleg immediately because who would put out that movie on Blu-ray? So you could search down like who puts, the distributor or whatever on Amazon. And I saw it said Vinegar Syndrome, so I immediately looked that up. And then I saw, their catalog wasn't very big. They only had like maybe 12 movies at the time, but it was stuff that I was very familiar with. So I reached out to them and I was like, hey, like, what are you guys doing? You're stupid. Like, but I would like to be a part of this somehow. So we just started like friendly conversations, and they were telling me what they were working on. And I was like, oh, this is really great. This is really great. And then Exploitation TV came around, their streaming service that they tried to start up. And they asked for me to be a beta tester for that. So I did, but they had a bunch of scans of movies that they didn't own the rights to yet. But they had the scans just because they constantly are scanning things just to preserve it. And so when I was searching on that, they were like, don't talk about anything because these movies aren't released yet. We don't know if we're going to release them. It's just stuff to put up there just to make sure we have the bandwidth and it works. But there's two movies on it, Severed Arm and House of the Dead, the 78 version by Sharon Miller.
Mhm.
And those are like two of my favorite movies of all time. And I was like, wait a second. I was like, are you guys like trying to put these out? Because if you are, like, those two movies, I wanted to start a label years ago. But when I looked into how much it would start up, it would be, like $20,000 to release a movie, and no one's going to buy The Severed Arm. So I just didn't do it. But I was like, if you guys are doing this, I would like to work on this. I know Sharon, I know the people behind The Severed Arm, like Gary Edelman, the producer and stuff. And they were like, yeah, sure, sure. So I just kept bugging them, like, hey, I know where movie rights are. I know where the negatives are because I've been wanting to do this for a while. I'm just like, I've always been interested in doing that. And then finally, I think out of like exhaustion, they were just like, sure, go ahead, do whatever, So like 24, 48 hours later, I went to them and I'm like, hey, here's 5 movies. And they were like, oh, okay, you were actually serious. And I was like, yeah, no, here we go. It's like, I think it was The Suckling, Flesh Eating Mothers, LA Wars, Splatter University, something else.
You got some choice titles there.
Well, it was just things that I really wanted to do myself.
Hmm.
Just the things that I grew up on and whatnot. And
All the kids should watch The Suckling.
Yeah, it's a good one to raise. Oh, very topical
I
today, more than ever, I think.
I have a very funny story about that. So yeah, then they were just, oh shit, Brad's actually serious. He's kind of know what he's doing. So let's kind of bring him on freelance. So I was like working on titles here and there, finding material, finding producers, finding people. And then Spookies came about. And I said, I know everybody asks about Spookies, but why isn't it released? Or why hasn't anybody done it? And they were like, oh, it's just the rights can't be found. And I said, well, I can do that, and so I did.
Hmm.
It me like, I think, a week.
I was going to say, how did you start that? Because that was one where it was like multiple parties involved, right? Or was it just
No,
that you couldn't find the person?
they just couldn't find the guy. It was just
Wow.
one guy,
Hmm.
So
Michael
like
Lee, the
you
producer of the movie.
you could have been a bounty hunter or you could have hunted movie
Oh,
rights. And
people say it all the time. I should be a PI on the side. So yeah, I found Michael Lee and I contacted him. He was in the UK. He was like at a retirement facility.
how do
And
you even find that? Like if they're not on Facebook or Insta, my quest is done. They're impossible to find. They might as well be a ghost.
I'm
That's
I'm really
impressive.
I'm really good at it. I just know certain things. certain channels to go through. So yeah, I found out he was staying at this retirement home, and it was actually really, that was the challenging part, was getting to actually to speak to him, because he didn't have a cell phone. I wasn't a family member. So it was like all these obstacles I had to go through. And then I had someone in the UK that went to go see him posing as a family member
Mm.
in order to get to talk to him, and we found out he owned the movie, and we paid him. And yeah, that's how it happened. And after that, the one of the owners at VS was like, yeah, we just bring him on full time, and he'll have plenty of stuff to do. And that's how I got the job at
I
VS.
love that. The nefarious kind of spy that you even have to have like an alter ego to go in just to get the rights to spookies.
Oh,
That is
weird things.
hardcore.
There's a lot of weird stories that have happened. But going back to the suckling, my dad passed away a few years ago. But as he was getting older, he I would have to stay with him while my mom went to go see her family, because he just wasn't, he was capable of doing a lot, but just someone to stay with him, because he was, like, this was when he was like 87, 88 years old.
Mhm.
So he was like, bring some of those movies over that you do. And so I brought things over, and I put on the suckling. And we were watching it, and he looks over at me. He's like, Brad, you're gonna get fucking fired. And I was like, no, they like this stuff. And he's like, this is awful. He was like, you're going to get fired. You need to do a better job. And I was like, okay.
Like you made the movie.
Yeah, no, that's my dad he was very very supportive of what I did, but he didn't know what I did. And
My dad,
so like, yeah.
yeah, my dad, and I correct him all the time, but he tells all of his friends I'm an actress. So, and he's supportive. Like he is so
Oh,
supportive
yeah.
of everything I do.
Yeah.
But he gets even confused. Like when I did a Lifetime film a couple of years ago, and then he called me up and said, I didn't see you in the movie. I thought you were in there. And I was like, no, Dad, I made it. And it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just happy that you didn't show him Good Luck, Miss Wyckoff, because that is a hard. That movie goes so. I think that movie's one of the best things they ever put out. But holy shit, does it go hard in that movie?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
a date movie or a dad movie.
Oh, wow.
Well, you remind me.
So-
You actually remind me of. Did you ever read that book about Brian De Palma making his big fella Devil Candy? The one where he's. It's a like somebody from Variety, I think, was a Vanity Fair was following the entire time of him making, what's the one with Bruce Willis and Bonfire of the Vanities, and there's an AD in it, and this AD is just like steals the whole book. It's basically he's trying to be like, he wants to be a great director, and he all the time he's like, Brian De Palma's like, if you can get a shot of the Concorde as it's landing with the sun poking through, if you can get that, I will start the movie with that shot. So there's this whole journey of the AD, like, if I can do that, I can prove myself. And then of course, watch the movie. It's the opening shot of the movie. It's the amazing shot. So you remind me of that guy, how you got to, which is good.
So were you a fan like from infancy? Or was this something that kind of developed? Like, was this always part of your life of like, I'm going to find the hardest to find, grungiest movies ever? Like it was for me. Or
Yeah.
something that was acquired?
Yeah, no. It started early, because I mean, I've posted little videos on Twitter before of I was dressing up as Freddy Krueger in when I was 3 years old for Halloween. Um, and my mom was a huge horror fan, so I grew up watching all the big mainstream stuff, and we would go to the video store and rent things, and I would just wanted more and more and more. So I was lucky to have like three mom and pop video stores around me when I was younger. And then we would spend summers in Ohio, and there was this video store there called Video Time in Akron. And it was literally probably the birth of what I became, because their section of exploitation stuff, and like they put a lot of like even like weird like softcore stuff in with like horror and drama, and you didn't know.
Mhm.
So I was renting like some Gary Graver titles when I was like, probably 8, that really fucked me up. Um, so yeah, I always wanted more and more. And then eventually I rented everything in the video store when I was probably about 13, 14 years old. And then DVD started coming into play. And going on eBay, you could find video stores dumping their VHS tapes for pennies. Sometimes you just would have to pay shipping, and you can get like 150 tapes. They all smelled like smoke,
Hmm.
but you could get them. And then I met probably when I was around 16, 17 years old. There's a guy I would go to auctions with my parents, and they would sell movies and sound equipment, whatever. And I met this guy named Travis, and he was a huge, huge horror fan. And he was older, probably in his 40s. I was always with my mom, so it wasn't weird or anything. Um, but he would give me movies, and then he said, "Hey, you need to go to these tape trading places like in Tampa."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Bring like $30 with you, and you'll leave with like all these like rare things." And so I was okay. So I found a couple that was in Tampa, and my mom took me, and literally just like a convention, people just lined up with all these like fucking blank tapes or like just little things etched on them, like the titles, like things that didn't have subtitles, and like, it was just all this weird shit. And, they'd be like, "What are you into? Gorman or German gore films?" And I'm like, "Sure." That's how I found my first like Olaf Ettenbach movie, was because I got like Premutos, like on a
Hmm.
VHS tape without subtitles.
Yeah.
Um, Zombie 90 was another one. But yeah, what was that zombie movie made in India? First zombie movie ever made.
Hmm.
Can't remember the name
Hmm.
of it. But yeah, I had that like that too. Hell's Ground, I think it's called.
Hmm.
So yeah, I just was getting titles like that, and that just turned me on to a whole other world. And then I became friends with Sage Stallone
Hmm.
through a internet forum, and I didn't know who it was, and because it was just, and then finally like he mailed me something, and I was like, I saw his name, and I didn't even put two and two together until like a year or two later that
Hmm.
it was Sly's kid. Traded with Aunt Tipson back in the day. So yeah, it was just like this weird like group of people that were just kind of embracing weird shit. And then yeah, essentially I just ran out of movies to watch. So I just kind of just started really looking into other countries, and
Hmm.
because the US just had so many weird titles that were just unaccounted for.
Yeah.
Still to this day, there's a lot. But when you get into foreign countries, especially like Russia and Poland, there's just so much content that is just not known.
Hmm.
So,
Oh yeah.
Well,
No, that's I did the VHS swaps, but then at the same time I was doing the stuff in the back of the Fangoria magazines where it'd be like Phantom Video, and you would email that, or not email, you would snail mail with $1, and they would send you back this like massive Xerox list of titles. And then I'd convince my mom to give me a check for $30. And then like to this rando person that I have no idea who it is, but I'm corresponding with them via snail mail from an ad I found in Fangoria, and you check off the titles that you want, and then you'd get back like VHS tapes with like masking tape over it, and on it says like Guinea Pig Part 4, and it's like okay. And that
yeah,
was,
yeah, no, exactly.
yeah, that was
And then I
the
got
way to do it.
and then I got into other stuff like, musicals and art house, and I became familiar with like faucets in Chicago,
yeah.
and that was a huge thing for me because
Wait,
I've
Elric worked
Yeah,
there,
I worked there
right?
for a couple years in the video department in 2008 to 10, I think. Yeah, so I
okay,
was
yeah.
mailing
This
out
was
lots of films.
Yeah, I don't know what year this, because when did they start? They
They've been
started
around
pretty
for a
early,
while, yeah,
right?
in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah, this had to been like I would say my senior junior year of high
Mm,
school, so 2002, 2003.
mm,
And yeah, I was like Netflix before
yeah,
Netflix.
yeah, they had
And
So
so
it was
incredible. You just walk in the back, and it was just like videotapes everywhere. I mean, it was pretty impressive collection.
did you
yeah.
just say you got into musicals?
Yeah, I'm a huge musical fan.
Okay,
Yeah.
you can come on the show anytime you want. Actually,
I'm
Elric, you
logging
can
off.
log off now. Brad's replacing you. Okay, so musicals are my other jam. It's like
Yeah.
extreme, gross out, weird, wacky, makes you cringe horror. and musicals. And whatever that intersection is, there lies my brain. And I'm constantly trying to convince Elric to watch musicals. So wait, do you get into the hard to find musicals as well? Because I can't find anybody else who does that. Have you seen Catch My Soul? That's like my recent Catch My Soul.
Yeah.
It's my recent. It's like Jesus Christ Superstar before Jesus Christ Superstar. So good.
Catch My Soul. I had two musicals that I was going to bring to the show, but I decided not to because I was going to keep it more genre related.
No, okay, I'm going to hit you with my other deep cut musical that it's when you talk about things not being distributed in the States. Have you seen Midnight Ballad for Ghost Theater? You're in for a fucking treat. South Korean. It is a South Korean musical. If Tim Burton was directing a South Korean musical about the film industry, and it is
I just typed it in.
Standing Midnight Ballad for Ghost Theater. It is, you're going to have to get an import. It is so fucking worth it.
Yeah. No, I love musicals, cute stuff. Like one of my favorite musicals is, have you ever seen Eight Women?
Yes. Oh my gosh. The French one. I love that one so much. It's like this beautiful intersection. I know Elric has seen that one too.
It's François Ozon. I've seen most of his films.
Yeah.
But my thing with musicals, I always tell her this, is that it's like pulling me by the like to try to get me to watch one, and every time I watch one, or a live theater, musical theater, I always love it. I don't think I've ever not liked it. It's just I don't ever want to watch it, and I can't explain what that is. It never pulls me.
I have things like that.
Yeah.
Didn't I take you to a live production of Kinky Boots? Am I remembering this correctly?
But as a kid, I saw Cats. Like Cats was my first sexual experience. So I was like 8 or 9, and I'm sitting in the front row at Cats, and one is like climbing on my lap, and I was just like, "Oh, hello! Like this is all right." And I didn't even like. I remember it to this day, thinking, "How weird is this?" There's a woman dressed as a cat, purring up to me. So I'm definitely a fan. But not to get weird, but we're already weird.
Just with cats, like grinding your, as a kid.
Like,
that's
however you got to learn.
That's your thing.
Okay, so let's set up quickly the difference with TERROR VISIONS, and then let's jump into your picks. So how are things going, I guess, in that world? Because we know Vinegar Syndrome, we can tell that they're obviously doing all right because of all the partner labels you have to assume. We're not talking from inside the machine, but outside the machine. But like for you, how hard is it to keep labels like this going?
It's very difficult because there's only two of us, essentially, Robbie and myself. We have, his wife, she does a lot more of the logistics of like warehouse and art and stuff like that. And then Earl Kessler does our art. So we have a couple freelance people that help us, but it's rough because, the industry is kind of always changing and people always want different things at different times. Like things kind of come in waves. So you just kind of have to go with the flow. Like we've shifted some of what we're doing. Like we had things planned that we pulled back because that's not selling well right now. So we've kind of moved a few things around. I don't like the kind of the fetishizing over labels that people do. Because I feel that when you do that, you get disappointed with their catalog of things that are not in your wheelhouse. So I always tell people, like, don't buy everything we release, just buy things that you want. But I want you to buy things that we release all the time because it's going to turn you on to something very different than what you're probably used to. So it's like a gateway label to other movies, because I do feel people are very, very closed-minded when it comes to watching movies. They'd rather rewatch Suspiria for the 20th time than watch something that they've never been exposed to. And that's why curation has always been a big thing for me, because I like to have people watch something, because I've said this a million times, I should put it on a shirt. The biggest crime, I think, in cinema is you can't watch a movie for the first time again.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's a really terrible thing, but you can live vicariously through people watching it with somebody.
Yeah.
That's why it's so great to have kids, because you get to watch them watch it, and that makes it's almost like you're watching it for the first time. Or a good.
How old are yours? How old are yours?
My child is 19.
Oh, wow. So you're getting to like watch everything now. So I'm just now getting to the cusp of that. Like Marnie is 11, almost 12. So like we just watched Scream together for the first time a couple nights ago, which was amazing. Seeing it through her eyes and seeing like the stuff that she was excited about and, you know, what she figured out ahead of time and things like that. Like it was just, it's been so much fun rewatching horror films with her, and having somebody to take to horror movies has been awesome. So.
Yeah. She was very into horror. I started her off a lot earlier than I probably should have. But I was making short films and I had her in one when she was 6. And I cut her up. I cut her off her arms and disemboweled her. So she got to see how movies were made. So her perspective on how we watch things changed. So she wasn't scared because she would turn to me when she was like 7 years old and say, "Wow, that looked really cool. Wonder how they did that." You know, because she knew it was fake. So we opened it up a little bit. It was just that some scary things, you know, she was still scared of. You know, like it depends. Like honestly, it was the music. The music would actually affect her because I remember watching. She's probably like maybe 8 or 9. We put on The Ring, and it just started, and she was like, "No, I can't." She just started crying. I was like, "Okay, yeah, it's fine. We'll turn it off." I just thought this would be fine because it's like PG-13. It's like kind of a kids movie, but I know it's scary. And yeah, I turned it off. But then you know, we didn't see everything in the theater together.
But now you can show her Boxing Helena and be like, "Remember when you're 7? We did this. Remember when I cut you up and put you in a box? Remember that?" See, there's always a good no, but I think there's a certain type of film lover, and we are obviously that, and like you know, obviously Brian Sauer and people like this, people who well, he's a little bit more nostalgic than some where he'll rewatch certain things, but I'm definitely I would rather watch 400 new movies in a year than rewatch my favorite movies in a year, you know, and so I think it's partly because we're always trying to find that it's probably trying to replicate something that it's very hard to replicate, a feeling sometimes, and you might get 1 in 100 that it's like really hits that spot. But where I agree is you won't know what that is if you don't take risks, because like I wouldn't think I would get that from Severed Arm. If I saw a title saying Severed Arm, I wouldn't think that would be my favorite movie of that year. But then I watch it and I go, "This is you know what I mean?" And so I think you have to be willing to look in weird places because you just don't know what the thing is until you're in it, right? So
I think you hit it, Elric. Like we're chasing some, and it's why we love our deep cuts so much, is that we are chasing some weird high of this is some absolute hidden gem, but it is so damn good it has lit me up inside. Yeah. And we find it every couple of weeks. We'll find one.
There's
like
something,
that.
And that's why some people will take us to task. "Oh, you overhyped this," you know, because it's like
I know. I'm on the show last week. I'm glowing about Honky Tonk Freeway, and I had somebody message me and be like, I thought it was so good. I had such a good time with it. And somebody messaged me and they were like, "Oh, this is such garbage." And I was like, I thought it was so fun just going in blind and not knowing anything about it. And I just thought it was a blast. So, that was my glow for the last couple of weeks.
Though, because it's like 11:30 where you are, we're very selfish podcasters.
Yes.
Here it's a breezy 8:30, but where you are, it's 11:30. So we asked you.
I stay up till 3 a.m.
Okay, good. So we'll keep rolling.
Get up, my God, that's lunacy.
6 or 7.
I can't put words together unless I get at least 6 hours, and I'm lucky if I get 6 hours. But if I don't have that, I'm not.
I slept in a little bit today. So I'm fine.
Well,
you 19-year-old, you can do that now. That's
she's in college. She's not even here. Yeah, but I do have 4 dogs, so
that is walking
bright and early.
But so if those people who aren't on our Patreon, we always do our deep cuts over there. But we thought it'd be fun to bring somebody on to give us 5 deep cuts or 5 films they want to talk about that we have no idea which ones you're picking, and so you're going to illuminate us this time. You're going to do all the work.
5.
Wait, so you don't have deep cuts?
No, we have no deep cuts.
It's just you.
This is just you.
This is all you.
Now I'm very nervous.
No, it's fine.
No,
we'll have you back on a Patreon show someday where we'll give ours. But here it's just you. We don't have time. It's 11:30.
There's people that we bring in our Patreon show just to bring us titles that we haven't heard of, like Daniel Krauss. Have you met Daniel yet? I feel like y'all should hang out.
The Romero guy, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he is like super into his deep cut. Oh my God, there's like 4 copies of this available, and I have one of them type films.
Yeah.
And so he every single time he comes on the show, I leave with like crazy titles. And so yeah, that's why we were like, Brad's coming on, he's bringing us deep cuts.
Oh, I told Elric I
You had
it was
10.
so
Yeah.
hard for me to
Yeah.
yeah, well, I started like at 20
Yeah.
and then I went down to 10 and then I
You
was
can email us
No,
the
come,
full
no, come, no,
list.
don't tell us to come back on. We'll
Come
do,
back on.
we'll do
We'll
it
get
again.
all of them.
Yeah.
so
Well,
all right,
how did you
so,
come up with your like how did you decide which ones to do here? Like what was
um
your thought process?
just ones that over the past I just picked I think the past like few
Yeah.
years that have really impacted me
Yeah.
because it's more or less in my recent memory.
That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of how I came up with it. Just things that I've watched over the probably past 2, 3 years that I think about pretty frequently,
Cool.
and like, things I'm like actively trying to get to release and things like that. So yeah,
All right. Well, you're just
and
gonna
then I was
the
like,
show is yours now.
I have a pen ready to go, sir. I'm
oh,
using my lavender pen, which is big. So yeah.
okay. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was have you seen this movie called Wavelength?
You mean the Michael Snow short film? No.
No, it's directed by Mike Gray.
Oh,
So it's I think it came out in 1983. It's produced by uh
yeah.
I don't think it was known producer, but it was edited by Mark Goldblatt, which is James Cameron's
Uh-huh.
editor.
Yeah.
Shot by Paul Goldsmith, who shot like The Lost Boys and um, Captain Corelli's Mandolin, which is a beautiful looking movie. Movie's not very good. But Mike Gray also wrote the China Syndrome, which he
Uh-huh.
was very known for because of the incident that took place, like because that explosion
Yeah.
happened at the nuclear facility like 12 days later after the movie like premiered. So he was a documentarian. He started it in Chicago. He had a group there. I think it was called just the Film Group, and they were making documentaries like about like politics and revolutions and everything like that. So he started writing. So his writing is kind of like he uses that investigative journalism,
Hmm.
but also like documentarian approach to that like fictional narrative. So I think it's he's very creative, and this is the I think the one like narrative feature he directed,
Hmm.
and it didn't go anywhere. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's Dream did the score.
Oh wow.
Like it has these all these people like behind it that it's stars David Carradine, Cherry Curry from the Runaways. Um, and this is like kind of like she was already acting because she was like in Foxes, she was in Parasite, she was in a Twilight Zone movie, and then she was in Wavelength. So yeah, David Carradine plays this like struggling musician, and Cherry Curry's his girlfriend, and they're just kind of like chilling at the house. And she like hears this, it's a really like wonderful sound that they use. I don't know if Tangerine Dream created it, but she can hear like this like noise, this cry. And it turns out that 4 days ago, a spaceship crashed
Hmm.
in California and they're housing these aliens. So she's like walking around the streets with her boyfriend trying to figure out the sound's getting louder, the louder, and it's coming from this like country club looking building,
Hmm.
and they go and it turns out to be a government facility where they're holding these aliens, and they turn out to be these like children. That's the one part of the movie that kind of falls flat, is that they just took some kids and like shaved their head and like sprayed them like gold. um so they're she's telling them that they need to get back to the house, they need to get back home. And it's I think it when it probably came out, it did major cities because it was distributed by Corman's like New World at the time. So I think it just kind of got tossed in that like ET ripoff,
Hmm.
kind of realm, but it's not a kids movie. It's for adults because it's really lo-fi, and it kind of like it focuses so much on the characters and the mystery of what's happening. That there's not it's not like Mac and Me or shit like that. And it's shot. The Paul Goldsmith did it in an amazing job because he captures kind of the isolated parts of like in Santa Monica, I think it's shot. But then a lot of it is shot in Arizona when they get to kind of taking the aliens out of California. They're in just this desert that's supposed to be in California, I guess, but it's obviously Arizona. But the movie it's gorgeous. It's very the score that Tangerine Dream used. They do a lot of organs. It feels kind of spiritual. There's this church. They take him into a church once in the movie, and they literally kind of like have these like hymns playing. This wonderful like it feels like a ceremony that they're putting together with just the score that Tangerine Dream is doing. But yeah, it's very good. It never been on DVD. It had VHS over here. I think Embassy put it out. It hit, I think, VHS in like Japan and like Germany, but never anywhere else. It's an incredibly rare movie to find.
So like for us, if we want to see this right now, what's our best bet? Like YouTube, dark web, or just hitting you up?
I just found it on YouTube while we were talking.
YouTube.
I just bookmarked the YouTube, which is wild.
It depends what the quality though of the YouTube is versus your library, Brad. Do you have a better version in there?
It does not look good on YouTube.
Yeah, it the best that I have is like just a rip tape.
Yeah.
And I saw it for the first time just a few years ago, a couple years ago, and it just blew me away because it's so well done, and just the powerhouse of talent behind it. Why isn't it more well known? And Mike Gray's a known guy in that community. Like he's a known documentarian, and this was a big deal for him because part of the movie like is prediction, and that's what he's kind of like known for. So this is about extraterrestrial life and aliens, which, if you believe in aliens or not, that's a thing by itself. So
looks like he also wrote one of the best Chuck Norris movies, Code of Silence. That's a great movie.
Yeah, he wrote a few films after he started doing his documentaries and everything, and wrote some books on like drugs and whatnot. But yeah, it's a really, really rad movie.
Have you investigated if there's a nice print out there somewhere, like if this film could be saved?
Well, so the film only played in I think 6 cities when it's released. So if I can find the right people, then they probably still might have the negative. Because it was definitely edited on film. It wasn't like edited on tape or anything because it was theatrical. Like I said, New World put it out, but they did a very, very limited run, like 6 city type thing. So finding a print would be rare, but the negative, hopefully, if the producer owner still has.
Maybe Rodman Flender might be listening, and he definitely worked there at some point, so maybe he'll know.
For Corman, he'll know.
He was there. He might know.
He'll know what's lurking.
Yeah, so I would love to do. I know the Cormans don't own it; they just distributed it, but who knows who has what? Because the thing is it's really well lit. There's some moments when they're in the kind of the government facility with the aliens, kind of like in these like chamber beds, and they just have this like really kind of look with this like smoke rising and like yellowish, like pukey lighting. It looks like a yellowish greenish light. But it's on tape, so
you don't know what it looks like.
It looks good.
Yeah.
It's just that you can't get that full effect without clarity. But yeah, it's really well shot, and it's very tight. Because Mark Goldblatt is one of probably the best editors, and he edited this, so it moves along. It doesn't waste any time, and a lot of it is talking. Like a lot of it is about the characters and these government officials talking. So, but it moves along. And yeah, I just think it got dismissed because of everybody making ET ripoffs.
Yeah.
They think it is because it has a family of aliens, like fucking Mac and Me or something.
Yeah.
But it's not even close to that. It's very much a drama.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like
Yeah.
something I'd want to watch. So, okay, that one goes on the list.
Okay, it's on the list.
Where do you go from there?
4 stars. 4 stars.
Yeah.
It gets the same as Stay Alive. It's right there.
Well, people always say that. They're like, how can you rate Jaws 5 stars, but Boarding House 5 stars? And I was like, it's
Like
just a
dinner and
different scale.
dessert. Dinner and dessert
Yeah.
stomachs,
It's completely different scale.
Yeah.
Like Pieces, 5
Yeah, 5
stars.
stars, obviously,
Yeah.
Dr. Zhivago, 5 star, like slightly, maybe 4.
Yeah.
That's slightly below Pieces. Yeah. So yeah. So it's a personality thing. Okay, hit us with number 2.
The other thing that I was thinking about was this movie called Mirage. It's from Japan.
We love Mirage.
You're talking about the trapped on VHS one?
Oh, no, this is from Hong Kong.
Oh, okay, different one. Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
not the
Desert
1990
slasher.
desert slasher.
Yeah.
Love that film.
So this is by Fu Ming Su. He's a known action choreographer. He's only directed a few movies in his life. But he started off doing kind of low rent chopsaki, like rip off Shaw Brothers movies, kind of like was a like Holy Robe of the Shaolin Temple, I think was one. And then he started doing these. He made Mirage, Mistaken Identity, and then Barry something. But he did like these 3 or 4 action movies at the end of his career. Mirage is insane. It's like Indiana Jones meets Lawrence of Arabia.
I literally just pulled it up on IMDb, and the first review that pops up says one of the best China-made movies ever.
Which was written by Brad.
Bold. It's Brad's review. No, it doesn't seem to be. It's written by Claude. It's Claude's review. But yeah, just about how the fighting scenes are amazing, and yeah, okay.
No, they had hundreds and hundreds of extras in this, and the fight sequences in this movie are to die for, but also the stunts are so wonderful. But at the same time, you can't help but think people died because, like, there's one sequence in the beginning where this dude just takes his motorcycle and runs it up this ramp and smashes through this like 30-foot neon sign, like 30 feet in the air.
Wow.
And his motorcycle hits, and then he just drops to the ground. And there's no padding. He's landing on like the ground.
It's like the Brian Trenchard Smith stunt gone wrong or something. Yeah.
Dude, it is so insane. And there's this even one moment this dude takes a jump like again off this bike, and he like smashes the front tire into the sand, and then you could tell his body, his like face hits the bike. And then there's just this immediate huge explosion, and he just disappears. And you're like, man, he's probably good because Hong Kong guys, they and women, they do these stunts for real. That's the thing is like when you look into like Hong Kong stunts, you're like, are they hitting each other? And it's like, yeah, they actually really do hit each other. They don't do it 100%.
Yeah.
They do it like 50%. But in Hong Kong stunts, that's why the fight scenes look real, is because they're actually really are kicking and hitting each other. And so yeah, some of these stunts, there's sword fights, there's explosions, there's gun battles, there's a horse fight, which is there's a little bit of probably animal cruelty in this movie. So if you have a light stomach for that, I probably won't suggest watching it, because they really do get these 2 horses to like kick with their back feet and fight each other. And if you've ever been on a farm, you're gonna get knocked out or die.
I wonder if this movie ever got to play at the New Bev, because they do pretty good at playing their Monday night Hong Kong doubles and stuff. This seems like something to discover.
I highly doubt it.
Really? Okay.
Highly doubt
so
it's
does
played,
this one have any type of physical media release? Like, can I find a Blu-ray or a DVD?
No. Laserdisc in Japan.
Laser disc in Japan.
We invited them on for deep cuts. They're nothing on
gauntlet
4K.
has been thrown.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you might be able to find it on YouTube. Years ago, I got an import, paid like $100 for it.
Yeah.
And I have a rip
Okay,
of it, and I can send to you.
Yeah, you charge $12 per rip, and you'll pay that 100 back.
And then it actually has on that laser disc, it had a dubbed version. So
wow.
if you want it dubbed, I also have the subtitles.
Well, I'm hunting now. So well done, sir. I'm already on the hunt.
And I like that you're being true to your label because you've hit sci-fi and now martial arts. So what is next on the list?
What is number 3?
So the other one, I would say this one is probably the rarest of them. It's called Augie, the Fury of Evil.
I like that you actually just made up a movie and no one will know. You'll be, this one's so rare. You just decided you'd make something up.
Yeah, it's called The Killer Blender. And you're never going to find it.
Augie, the beer can.
Never been released anywhere.
I could talk. There's a lost slasher film called Silent Death I could talk about, but I won't.
Okay.
I won't. That's like that is virtually unavailable.
Bring that one to actual deep cuts when we do the show, because that will actually be. I am actually interested.
That'll be interesting.
So this is called Augie what?
Augie?
Augie, AGI. The Fury of Evil. It's from, I believe it's from Japan, yeah. Because it's set in feudal Japan. So it's around 1984. Honestly, this is probably the one movie I don't know a lot about because it's just so low budget and rare to find. I don't know if it's ever been on home video. It could have just been broadcasted on television, but it's the story of it is actually a legend in Japan dating back like 800 AD or something. So it's a known folklore that on this bridge, if you take it from start to finish, you'll be like haunted by this demon. And so basically what happens in the movie is that there's this samurai and he's told by his lord to go because they're kind of like talking about legends and like spooky things and stories they've heard. So the Lord asked this one samurai, be like, go out there and check it out, see if it exists. So he does, and then he starts to be haunted and his wife by this demon. But there is some like it's made in 84, but it is doing things that a lot of horror films from our 80s was doing, but this did it first. Like the only thing that this person could have seen was maybe Phantasm. And was inspired by that because there's some Phantasm shit in this.
How do you spell it again? Because I haven't had any luck when you've been looking this up.
I just dropped the link. If you look at our chat, I just dropped the full movie. Not that I condone that type of thing, but if you just look at the chat on our Zoom, Elric, I just dropped the link to the full movie. But
I'm meaning like on Letterboxd, I can't even find it. So I'm like, it's like
it should. I have it rated on Letterboxd.
It popped up as the Fury of Evil when I added it to my list.
Oh, Fury of Evil.
Yeah, AGI.
Maybe it's
AGI, comma, the Fury of Evil.
Okay.
Maybe that might help.
I'll find. Okay, it's finally turned up. It took a while. Okay.
But yeah, not so much like it's a samurai movie. There are some samurai that go out and try to find this thing, and they end up like the last 30 minutes of this movie are just like nonstop like bloodshed and monsters. And it kind of like it was so funny. I saw, this is a weird tangent, but when I saw the new Deadpool Wolverine movie where she puts the hands like through his head and they come out his eyes, that fucking happens in this movie. The monster has this hand like come out in his like eyeballs and his like fingers are moving around, and it's like a mix between the monster and Watchers and like I don't know. It's a rat. The monster like is like a shapeshifter, so it changes pretty consistently of what it looks like, but it's ripping people apart. And
Well,
I'm
on
so I want to
Letterbox,
see this one.
only one of my friends has seen it. It's Brad Henderson who gave it 5 stars, and one of my friends now wants to watch it, and it's Elric Kane. So I
Yeah, no,
think that
it's only
we
Brad,
three.
and there's a girl I follow on there. She always watches lots of great Asian stuff. Called her name's Chris something, and you are the only two people. She's like the person I go to for like the craziest Asian films, and so I'm glad to see another good one. Okay, looks definitely like the first one I want to watch.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's good, and also like it's very low budget because there's really only it feels like three locations in the movie. Is one they have like indoors. The wife constantly like is seeing the demon and hearing it, and it's really well lit, like green, red, that sort of thing. And then they have the bridge sequences, and then they're just kind of wandering around out in the middle of nowhere half the time, like in the forest. So very, very low budget, but it has a lot of if you're into like of the hard like Indonesian horror, it has that cinematography and it all of that feels very fever dreamish
Hmm.
to me. So that's kind of what this film feels like. It doesn't actually feel Japanese at all.
Hmm.
It feels Indonesian.
Hmm.
There's a Indonesian movie called have you ever seen or heard of a movie called Ro?
I think so. That one sounds
It's the
incredibly.
Hellraiser ripoff.
Yep.
Uh,
Okay. I have seen it. It's been years, but yeah, I did
It
see that.
it kind of feels like that a little bit
hmm.
of
Yeah.
the cinematography and whatnot. But yeah, it's weird because when I think about it, I never think about it being Japanese. I think about it as like I said, um, uh, Indonesian. So.
Okay,
Oh.
so we're going
Okay.
sci-fi. We've got our samurai film now, monster movie. We're two.
Oh, so another one that I really really love this one. This is a little different. It's called Mangugan. It means the moon god.
It means the moon
And
what? The
it's
moon.
God,
Uh-huh.
God.
Okay.
So it's a made for TV kind of slasher giallo. It's based in Stockholm. The movie is from Sweden, and it's actually based on the Swedish tent killings that happened like I think it was in the
Hmm.
60s, where this
Mhm.
dude just came along and like killed families in their tents, like kids, and really, really terrible
It was
tragedy.
also supposedly the inspiration for Friday the 13th.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
one
would
of them.
explain
I
that
mean,
would
that
explain
and
a
Bay
lot.
of Blood. But I was on a
Yeah.
TV show a number of years ago for Stars Network, and it was called Real Stories, REEL. And they had us trace horror films back to their roots. And that was one of the early influences for like Friday the 13th, that mixed with Bay of Blood.
Hmm.
And squibbly
Oh,
bam, you get Jason, was those tent
all right.
killings.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, this is actually like the tent killings, but a more modern. It doesn't take place in the 60s. It takes place like in the 80s or 90s.
Hit me with
Um,
this title one more time. Mangugan.
Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
find it on there.
Mangugen.
DEN. Yeah, man, good.
Got it.
It
And
comes
with
up
an
as the moon god on Letterbox as well.
umlauts above the U, I think
Yeah.
It
is
was the
how the
umlaut that was throwing me. Got it. Got it.
yeah
Thank you.
yeah. Do they call it umlauts when they're in Sweden? That's just a German. I don't know. But anyways, that's how you spell it. So yeah, it's based around the tent killings, and so basically these four people are murdered, and they just think it's a one-off, but then it happens again. And kind of like it's more of a police procedural. That's where the kind of the giallo comes in a little bit, but it's shot like an Italian film of that from that era, from like the 80s, and it's lit like that, frame like that. You have a very old killer, and you have your twists. And it does feel like one, it has that police procedural, but it does feel like that investigative police movie that while some giallos are so good.
Oh yeah. I mean, you
Where,
have
That
our
really works.
attention with this one.
yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't been able to find this one even in my normal kind of unlegal sources. So where have you seen this? Or is this like one that I need to
I I I bought a DVD that came out in 2007. somewhere around there, and then I
Okay.
ripped it, and then I created my own subtitles.
Oh.
But
Oh,
I can get you,
wow, that's some hardcore.
I can get you, I can get you a
How did you
copy.
do? How do you
I
create
would
your own
love.
subtitles for from that language? How do you do that?
I have a couple programs
Oh,
that
okay.
do it.
No, that one looks really good. I read
Yeah.
some another mutual friend, Jacob. He wrote something like feels like a Scandinavian Manhunter TV version of Manhunter or something, which is
Yeah, well,
exciting.
that's the cool
Yeah.
part of the film is that they, the cops are like they really don't want this to happen again, so they go back to this old school profiler that's retired, and they're like, "Hey, man, we need your fucking help. Like, we can't have this happen again."
Hmm.
So the he goes through and he's trying to find, and they find this imprint like in the dirt of this mask, and then they're like, "Oh shit." This mask probably means something. This actually isn't just random killings. This feels like it's more ritualistic. And then they start being mailed tapes.
This is the most I've
Um,
wanted to see a movie
Oh
this
my
year.
God, I want to
yeah.
see this so bad.
It
Why
just
am I
sounds
not
like
seeing this?
Longlegs
Like,
is just copying this. They're just
oh
like,
my God, this
So,
sounds
well,
amazing.
it predates a lot of stuff because in the 80s, like there wasn't, I think this is 88. So, I mean, found footage existed like with, Cannibal Holocaust and
Mhm.
stuff like that, but it was very
it
unfamiliar
wasn't
for
videotape sending.
footage.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're watching, and it's really creepy because the killer shoots in night vision, so he sets the camera up,
Huh.
and then he goes up and he just starts like fucking stabbing the tents and like slitting throats, and it's not very gory because it's made for TV, but there's no sound during that time, so it's like you're watching those 8 millimeter stuff of like Sinister.
Oh yeah, I want to
That's
see
what it
this
feels
one
like.
badly.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
you got our
Yeah.
So
attention.
yeah,
Okay.
Tell me no more.
it's just really creepy and really well done. And there's like again, it's not like guns blazing, chasing through homes of trying to find this killer. It's literally this police procedural, and when they get closer, they start to uncover a couple things, and they're like, "Fuck!" And you're as the audience, you're like, "Holy shit!" Like, is this what's going to happen? And yeah, it's the last like 15 minutes are so crucial in the movie because it changes everything. But yeah, it's really really well done, really creepy, and just yeah, just something that people just don't talk about.
Yeah, no,
So
yeah, I've
Yeah.
never heard anyone
Okay.
say Mangudin before. This is the first time.
No,
yeah.
and this one looks hard to find.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be emailing you for links. So okay, hit us with the last title.
um I don't know. So a movie that really impacted me a couple years ago, and it actually interesting because I know it's a book that was like written in the 1800s in Russia, but it's called The Vampire Family. I don't know how to pronounce it's. I know they're called like Vertilax is like the Russian
Vortilax,
name
yeah, the
for
Vortilax.
Vortilax.
Relax.
Well, there's a movie that just came out that's based on that book.
Yeah, the
So,
Vortilac, right?
yeah,
It's a
so
good
it's
movie.
it's very much yeah, it's very much like not because that's more of like it's kind of situational comedy
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah.
So this one's much more serious, but kind of plays that trope of there's this kind of investigative journalist who is being he's like just about like he's gonna get married and his boss sends him on this thing because of these disappearances that are happening like in this town, so he goes and he's trying to find out why these people are dying, and he's warned like there's some weird shit going on, and so he comes across like this family, these people, and one of these guys is like turned, so he's like picking off like the weakest people in the home. Like he drains the fucking dog. He like kills like the little kid because they're so weak he can like suck their blood. And the character blacks out and then comes to, and I don't want to spoil it too much because obviously people haven't seen these
Yeah.
movies.
Is this the one from
Um,
1990?
Yeah, the Russian one has some Russian
yeah,
names on it.
yeah,
Klima.
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
There's a bunch of movies called There's a Hong Kong
Yeah.
vampire family. So okay,
Yeah.
found it.
This is 1990 from Russia. So, but what's so great about this movie is that it is like when I want to watch like I think we all have our own idea of horror.
Yeah.
And so my idea of horror is setting and isolation. And like I My one of my favorite of all time is Messiah of Evil
Oh
because
yeah.
One of my our
that
favorites too.
Yeah.
that atmosphere in that movie is what creates the horror movie for me. I think it's one of the best like shot movies of all time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what Vampire Family brings in because it's so dark, it's so moody, the atmosphere is incredible. It's really well shot, it's well lit. You feel that kind of impending doom just by looking at the screen. Like you're like, man, this doesn't feel right. Like something's wrong. Like you're trying almost yelling at your actor to get the fuck out because you know that this isn't right just by how the movie looks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important tool sometimes. And a lot of films can do it when it is kind of like seaside horror, like Messiah of Evil or
Daughters
even
of
something.
Darkness.
Dead and Buried.
Yeah, like yeah, dead, especially Dead and Buried. There's just some films like that that kind of really grasp that loneliness,
Hmm.
and that's what Vampire Family does, just with how it's made.
Have you seen Night of the Devils, the Italian one that's about Vordeluk's family?
Yeah, that's like the second
Yeah.
movie that was based
On that
off of
sort
that
because I love that
writing.
film.
Yeah.
That's like a favorite of mine. Just because again, it's the creepy way that they all become. It becomes a familial kind of vampire, like they become one entity almost. That
Yeah,
it's. I want to see this one now because that sounds like up my alley.
yeah.
Yeah, I
There
just
was,
dropped a link. It's got a hell of a static buzz on it, but it's there. So
yeah.
it's subtitled. I am gonna have to watch it.
There you go. You got it. But yeah, there was a movie like a few years ago that was based off of that book. And it's really unique because it's a vampire hunter that thinks he's becoming a
Hmm.
vampire. It's really neat, and it's based off that old writing. It's from I think like 2020 or something
Hmm.
like that. But anyways, but yeah, Vampire Family just atmospheric and just like weird. And the use of just the surroundings and just the area and just natural looking rather than sets because I also like movies where you can't or you do it to your audience you can't tell what decade they're from.
Hmm.
um and movies don't utilize that enough, I don't think, because I love that because it's like that's kind of where the unsettling part happens because can they call out on cell phones? Do you even have cell phones yet? Like,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So it just, yeah, that sense of isolation and just like I don't you don't know what to do. But also the story of him kind of slowly figuring out that something's wrong with this family, and then is he becoming a vampire and he just doesn't know it yet, just because of kind of the loss of time that he starts to discover because he goes back to his like normal life and they're like, you've been gone for a while, and he's like, I've been gone for like 3 fucking days, what are you talking about? And like people aren't talking to him, and it's like it's a pretty gnarly movie. It's a very slow burn, but it's very, very good.
Nice.
And even if you don't like the story, visually, it's just a stunning movie.
Okay, well, I'm going to recap here the 5 picks from Brad Henderson, none of which I've heard of before. So I'm
Yeah,
super
neither.
impressed. I got Wavelength from 1983. I got Mirage from 1987. I got Agi, Fury of Evil from 1984. Mangugan, the Moon God from, I didn't write down the year on that one. And Vampire
88.
Family from 1990. These are some serious deep cuts because none of these, it looks like, have had any type of decent physical copy release. So, with that,
And you took us until midnight your time. That's pretty impressive. It's 12,
I'm
12, 12
totally
your time.
I am totally tantalized by all of these. So
Yeah.
this is tune in for a recent upcoming episode of Deep Cuts as I try to find these and then watch shitty copies on YouTube.
Mandugu, I got
So
Mandugo, or not Mandingo, but Mandingo. I could double feature.
Good movie too.
I do
Mangugan.
like Mandigo. No, these are great. Well, I think keep your other 5 and let's do it on deep cuts so you can like because I also want to hear the story about the movie that doesn't exist that you're mentioning this last
Yeah,
week.
we got
Oh,
to get
yeah.
you
But
on
not at
Deep Cuts
midnight.
super
We'll
soon.
do it earlier next
Yeah,
time. We promise. We'll do it on a
yeah.
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, we tape deep cuts. That's where we throw our weird shit at each other. It's great. We'll have to have you on there. But thank you so much for joining us tonight, Brad. This kicked ass. So what do you have coming up through TERROR Vision that everybody should be checking out?
Yeah, I mean, we right now it's the limited edition of Rumpelstiltskin that we have. And then our next big thing will be in November, the end of November. So we have, right now we're trying to get our things together. We hope to have a big bash with a lot of weird and obscure crazy shit.
Awesome.
So.
All right. Well, this is our Halloween special. So you've just given a bunch of people. This is our last episode before Halloween. So hopefully you've given some people some good fun stuff to hunt for. So.
Hey, we just talked about Seaside Horror, and you have Night Tide back there.
Oh yeah,
so.
I do have that. That's one of my
his
favorite posters.
Beautiful one. Is this our last episode before Halloween? I don't know if you just saw me.
No, our next record
it's
comes out
November
November
1st.
So this is
November 1st.
That's why this one's bigger. We've got 2 guests. We got
two guests tonight. Yeah,
but we'll let this guest go to bed.
Yes. And so quickly, as we are out, what is the first thing I do when I get brought on full-time at USC? Damn right, it is show a screening of Hellraiser 3 in IMAX. So on Wednesday, October 30th, you can join me, Gary Tunicliffe, who did all the beautiful special effects makeup, and writer Peter Atkins at the USC IMAX Theater as we show Hellraiser 3. It is free to everyone. You do not have to be a student at USC. Anybody can come. You can find out more information on fangoria.com or at USC Out of the Box Theater. Otherwise, you can find us on Deep Cuts on our off weeks, which is where we do all of our weird shit. And we will be back in another 2 weeks with another fun episode. Elric, I don't even know what we have going on, and I made the damn schedule. So
October,
I'm excited to see. Yeah.
I think your screening should have only been free if you played the CD Cenobite. Like whoever played the CD Cenobite, if you show up, if you're alive, you get them free. The rest
I thought
of
you were saying I had to show up like the CD Cenobite. Like that's my Halloween costume. That should have been my Halloween costume had I not started planning it like 3 days ago. So
happy
1
Halloween.
year.
Happy
Halloween, everybody.
Happy
Thank
Halloween.
you so much. The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah McKendry and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.